Rain came down the way it does when a city is tired of pretending it's fine, streaking the glass towers of downtown Chicago and flattening the noise into a single wet hum, and right there at the curb a wheel locked and refused to turn, leaving a woman stranded with traffic rushing past like indifference made visible. If this were you, soaked and invisible, would you wait for help that might never notice you, or would you accept the hand of the first stranger who knelt in the rain without asking your name? Evan had been counting quarters in his pocket for the bus ride home, calculating whether skipping dinner would cover tomorrow's lunch, when he saw the chair wobble and the woman lean forward with the small, careful panic of someone who has learned not to shout. He was 26 and new to the city in the way that meant he had not yet grown calluses for its cruelty, still carrying grief in his shoulders from a winter that had taken his mother and left him with a hollow apartment and a job that barely paid. He wore a thin jacket that soaked through instantly as he crossed the street, and he knelt on the slick pavement because it felt like the only honest posture left to him. He did not know her name. He did not know her story. He saw the bent footrest, the jammed wheel, the way rain slid off her hair and gathered at the cuffs of her coat, and something old and human pushed him forward. The city watched without seeing, cabs spraying water, office windows glowing warm and unreachable, while Evan tugged and twisted with hands already numb. The wheelchair was sturdy, the kind built to endure, but a small metal pin had worked loose, a simple betrayal that can turn independence into helplessness in a heartbeat. He had fixed things all his life, learning from a father who left early and a mother who worked late, learning because broken things were cheaper to repair than replace. As he worked, he felt the familiar burn of inadequacy and resolve, the knowledge that kindness was free but never easy, especially when your own pockets were empty. The woman watched him with the quiet alertness of someone used to measuring risk. Her name was Margaret, though no one called her that anymore, and she had learned long ago how quickly pity curdled into impatience. She had learned how to carry authority without standing, how to let people underestimate her and then correct them later. Rain traced the lines of her face, and she thought of the first winter after the accident, the long months of learning again, the doors that closed and the few that opened, the way power felt different now, more deliberate, more earned. She thought, too, of the morning she had accepted a new position she had fought for, of the building just 3 blocks away where her name was already on the door, waiting. If you were in her place, would you tell the stranger who you were, or would you let the moment remain unburdened by titles and expectations? Margaret chose silence, not as a test, but as a gift to herself, the chance to be simply a person in the rain. Evan's fingers slipped, then found purchase. The pin clicked back into place with a small, decisive sound that felt louder than the traffic. He checked the wheel again and again, careful in the way of someone who knows what it means to fail when the stakes are human. When it finally spun smooth, relief moved through him like warmth. He leaned back on his heels, rain dripping from his hair, and felt the brief, fragile pride of having mattered. They parted without ceremony, because sometimes the most meaningful moments leave no room for performance. Evan stood, shivering now that the work was done, and turned toward the bus stop, counting quarters again. Margaret rolled forward, testing the chair, and then looked back at the figure already dissolving into the rain, feeling an ache she could not name. She reached her building with damp hems and steady resolve, the lobby lights flaring like a promise, and she took the elevator up alone. The days that followed were heavy for Evan. The job at the warehouse ended abruptly when a contract fell through, and he packed his locker with the quiet efficiency of someone used to loss. He spent a night on a friend's couch, another staring at the ceiling of his apartment, wondering when the math would finally stop working. He filled out applications with hands that still smelled faintly of oil and rain, telling himself that persistence was a form of faith. In the city, rain dries and returns, and so do people who refuse to disappear. Margaret's first week as executive director unfolded in meetings and emails and the careful choreography of leadership. She listened more than she spoke, taking the measure of a place that had known instability and needed steady hands. She noticed the ways systems failed quietly, the small misalignments that turned into barriers for the vulnerable. She thought of the rain, of the kneeling stranger, of the ease with which he had helped without knowing it would ever matter. The memory did not leave her. It settled, asking to be used. When Evan arrived for an interview at a nonprofit he had applied to out of desperation and vague alignment, he wore his cleanest shirt and the same thin jacket, the rain long gone but the air still sharp. The building's lobby felt warmer than expected, accessible in ways he had never noticed before, ramps smooth and doors wide. He waited with a resume creased from too much handling, trying not to hope. If this were you, sitting there with your future balanced on a thin line, would you dare to imagine a different ending? Margaret entered the room with the quiet confidence of someone who has learned to make space rather than demand it. Evan recognized her in the same instant she recognized him, the memory striking like thunder delayed. There was no dialogue to soften the moment, no explanation offered or needed. He felt his face heat with embarrassment, the fear that he had been seen in his smallest moment and would be judged by it. She felt a swell of something like gratitude and resolve, the understanding that character reveals itself when no one is watching. The interview unfolded with the plain facts of Evan's life laid out honestly, his skills unvarnished, his gaps acknowledged. Margaret listened with the same attention she gave to budgets and strategies, because she understood that institutions are built by people who show up in the rain. She thought of the wheel, the pin, the choice to kneel, and she saw in Evan a steadiness that could not be taught. The decision, when it came, felt less like power and more like alignment. Evan left the building lighter, not because he knew the outcome, but because he had been seen. Days later, the call came, and with it a job that paid enough, that meant something, that allowed him to breathe. He walked home through streets that seemed newly arranged, the city no longer a wall but a landscape of possibility. He thought of his mother, of what she had taught him about decency, about doing the right thing even when it costs you. Margaret watched him grow into the role, watched the way he treated clients and colleagues with the same unassuming care he had shown her on the curb. She watched small changes ripple outward, a culture nudged toward kindness by example. She knew the story would never be told in press releases or speeches, and that was exactly right. Some truths are meant to live quietly, shaping outcomes without demanding credit. Rain returned months later, softer this time, tapping at the windows as Margaret paused at her office door and Evan passed by with a stack of files, nodding in that easy way of colleagues who trust each other. The wheel of her chair rolled smooth, the building hummed, and the city beyond kept moving, indifferent and miraculous. What would you do, standing at that curb again, knowing how one small choice can tilt a life toward hope? Before the end, take a moment and tell us in the comments what you felt at that rainy curb and what choice you believe you would make if you were there. If this story truly touched your heart, gently reminding you of the power of unseen kindness and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, so more quiet moments like this can find their way to those who need them most.